My name is Dr. Karma Corcoran. I'm an enrolled citizen of the Chippewa Cree Nation, and I have a brother and a friend here this morning, Leandru, who is going to share some of his story with us. Good morning, brother. Thank you so much for being here. I'm wondering if you would first of all introduce yourself and who your people are.
Yat e bene, yat e shike doshi dene, she ya Leandru Willie in the shi, Bilagana nishle, Twitch itni bashichin, Bilagana dashiche, Kiani dashinali, Akot ego shidene. Good morning, friends and family. My name is Leandru Willie. I'm a member of the Navajo Nation. On my father's side, my clans are Bitterwater and Towering House clan. And on my mother's side, I have some French Canadian, English, and Danish descent. I've born and raised in Arizona. I've been in Washington since about 2005.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable sharing with us a little bit about your incarceration, you know, what you were charged with and how long you were sentenced. Did you serve just once? Did you go back in? Would you share a little bit about that with us?
Absolutely. Let's see. Well, it wasn't, well, going to prison necessarily wasn't like, it wasn't out of the blue. I've been involved in the justice system probably since I was about 11 years old. Since 11 years old, I've been at some stage of the justice system, right?
Right.
And what really led up to it was, you know, I was strung out on meth. I was on drugs, and that's what fueled my criminal activity. I got involved in a lot of forgery, ID theft, counterfeits, you know, that sort of, a lot of financial crimes really, and drug possession charges. When I got caught, it was a bad day, you know, but then looking back now, it was a start of a good journey though. Yeah, it's kind of up and down, but yeah, I got booked in like 2010 for like 30 different charges.
Wow.
I bailed out, and then I got booked like 2 weeks later on 4 more counts, and so then they weren't letting me out.
Right.
So I sat in Pierce County Jail for about 14 months, taking my case to trial, and then the day that I went to go pick my jury, they came at me with a deal for 72 months with DOSA, and I was like, cool, let's do it. So I signed a paper, and a week later, I got shipped off to Shelton. Went through processing, and yeah, it's a very interesting moment in time.
Did you serve the whole 72 months?
No, in Washington State, you get a third knocked off for good time. So I got a little bit of good time knocked off of that, and then with the DOSA sentence, you do half your time in and half your time out. So I did half my time in, and then when I got out, I was supposed to do the rest of my time on the streets, but I didn't do well. I didn't have a very good, I thought I had a good plan for when I released, and I was like, yeah, this, you know what I'm saying, everything was gonna work out. I had this one plan, but that was wrong.
Yeah.
It was wrong. I had no backup plan. So when things started to fall apart, I just went back to what I used to do.
Sure.
And so, you know, I was out on the streets for about 18 months, and then I got booked again. I had to go back and finish the rest of my time, a little over a year and a half, and and that was a turning point in my life. That was a turning point in my life. I got a letter from my daughter, and at the time she was about 9 years old. No, she was about 12 years old, and you know, her mom hasn't been in the picture since she was 9 months old.
Oh my.
She's 19 now, but her mom was never in the picture since she was little. And so like when I came up here from California with her, it was just her and my mom and my sister that were up here. And you know, she wrote me a letter saying, she's like, you know, I feel like I don't have anybody, because she's like, my mom left. She's like, you're gone. And my son's mom, Trisha, she was taking care of my daughter at the time, but there were some issues, you know, between the family. And
Sure.
so my daughter really felt alone, but she put it in this really short letter, right? And I still have it to this day. It's in a box. And I was like, man, no, because I grew up without a father.
Right.
And, you know, growing up, I'm like, I never do that. I never do. And, well, sure enough, I followed right in my dad's footsteps. And But that's the journey that I've been on since I came home, is fixing those broken relationships, fixing the hurt that I've caused. So I've had a chance to rebuild relationships with both my kids. When I came home, my son was probably already 5 years old.
Wow.
And we didn't have much of a relationship. And so that was something that's something I worked on with him for years. And it was a slow go, because him and his mom, we talked, we get along real well. And I said, I'm gonna do this on his time, however he wants to do this. So he would come over for a few hours at a time, and then, and then maybe 2-3 months later, he'd be willing to spend the night. And then after about 6 months, he got a little bit more comfortable. But during that first year, right, he wouldn't call me dad. He called me Leandru, right, during that first year. But then towards the end of that year, he knew that it annoyed me. He knew that it got on my nerves. So he would call me Leandru, but he would smile. And then one day he was just like, Dad, and it's been Dad ever since.
Yeah.
So, and him and I, we have a great relationship. He comes and spends time with me whenever he wants. His mom and I, we get along great. With my daughter, things have gotten better. Things have gotten better. Her and I have talked. She's older now. She's kind of moved out, doing her own thing, but we have a very good relationship. She knows that if she's ever in trouble, she can call Dad. It doesn't matter what it is. While I was active in my addiction, I ruined a lot of good relationships, right? Especially with my mom. My mom's she's always been in my corner.
Right.
Yeah, and she's a wonderful, strong lady. And, it was heartbreaking to know how much that I really disappointed her. And my mom she's very big on making the most out of life. And she was telling me, she's like, man, you're just wasting your life. This is what you're gonna do? You're just wasting your life. She's like, there's other people out there that don't have that opportunity, and you're just wasting it.
Yeah.
And so I thought about it for a long time, and I was like, yeah, you're right. So then I just started looking at things that I was doing in my life, in different relationships, and started imagining how I wanted to be down the road, right? And it's weird, because getting involved with Wellbriety, that's a huge part.
I wanted to ask you also, because I know part of your journey of healing was getting involved with the Native spiritual services while you were in.
Yes.
And if you could share a little bit about, had you been involved in Native spirituality during this period of time where, frankly, brother, you weren't on the red road, and but yet we have brothers and sisters all the time who, still are somewhat involved, and of course, Creator knows, and so what about that when you were in prison was meaningful for you?
I think one of the most biggest things for me was the camaraderie. It was the accountability that we had for each other. And, if somebody's not out at the gate, or we're like, okay, well, where are they at? Are you coming to sweat? So we check on everybody, you know what I'm saying? And it was new to me to have that type of security, in a sense. Because I know I've done a lot of stuff with people on the streets, but did I get a single letter from anybody? No, I didn't.
Right.
I did not. And so that really changed my perspective on, well, who's really in my corner? And so when I was at OCC in 2011 and 12, they had the sweat lodge there. And I hadn't been to the sweat lodge for, it had been at least 10, 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah, the last time I was at sweat lodge, I had probably just gotten out of jail when I was 19 or something.
Okay.
And it was back on my reservation, and it was good. It was good. Things were a little different because it's kind of like a plain style sweat that they do. And,
right.
And on Navajo sweat, just the lodge is a little bit. Things are a little bit different, but we had a great group. We had a great hoop at OCC, and then when I was at Cedar Creek, we had a great hoop as well there too. Because and I always go back, it's that camaraderie. Because everything we do together. Like when we go sweat, we go together. We go eat, we go together. You know what I'm saying? We go play basketball, go to the gym, whatever. You're always with the hoop.
Yeah.
And so it was very comforting. But when we go out to the lodge or any time that we're doing anything that has to do with any type of ceremony, everybody knows it's not playtime. We're not there
Right.
to joke around. We're not there to do anything. Because if somebody lets a bad word slip when you're inside the lodge area, right? So you got to do 28 push-ups. And if you get disrespectful, you start talking crazy, you got to do 28 push-ups.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, and we really police ourselves in there. But it's odd to think that you would learn compassion in a place like that.
Right.
And that was something that was taught to me. There was an incident where, I found out what one of the Rose charges were, and I didn't really agree with it. But it wasn't my position so I just, I kind of stepped back for a little bit. Didn't associate with him or really anybody that he associated with. And then some, when the older bros kind of pulled me to the side, I was like, hey, what's going on? I told him how I felt. And he's like, okay, I understand that. He's like, and we started talking for a little bit, and he explained to me, he's like, we're trying to do something a little different here. So we're trying to show a little bit of compassion and, help these brothers get on the right road. Yes, they might have messed up. We all messed up, some in different ways than others, but we're all still good people.
Yeah.
And, we just have to create a path to get back there.
I appreciate that because I think oftentimes with the general public and certainly within our own communities, certain crimes are difficult to process and to have compassion and empathy for that person who has harmed someone, their family, their community so greatly is really important for their journey of healing. And as we've shared, over the last day or so, we all need community. We need that pathway home. And so we've got to be able to step back and say, wow, that's really hard for me to process, but I have to give it up to Creator. And I think also something that you spoke about was that opportunity with the women that I work with. I call it creating a life that you want when you get out of here. And sometimes it takes them a time or two in before they even have the capacity to think about a life different than running drugs or prostitution or all these different things. But like the letter from your daughter spoke to you, and so you thought about this life, this harm, what she means to you, and we're able then to create this different life.
Yeah, it was, and I owe a lot of it to the Wellbriety curriculum. It really made sense to me. It really put things into perspective. Like I was mentioning, I was trying to imagine like how I wanted to. I was imagining the person that I wanted to be, and come to find out that in like Medicine Wheel 12-step, right? That's the self-talk is a real thing.
Yeah.
Like how we see ourselves, our brains and our actions, everything reinforces that. So if we can change that image of ourselves, then everything else will follow suit.
Definitely.
And I was like, man, that's so powerful. I was like, man, so like I was just amazed at it. I was like, man, and so I put it to action, and things started to get better. There's bumps along the road, along with everything else.
Yeah.
But you just keep pushing forward.
In any life there is. Thank you. I was wondering, when you got out, if you could tell me, especially after this second time, how you got involved in serving the way that you do. A little bit about the organization, about what your previous role was, what you've transitioned into. I would just love to hear more about that.
Absolutely. I got out of work release in 2015, and I was released without any supervision. So I was off paper. I was done, everything. But before I had left work release, I got a message from one of the bros, and he was asking if anybody was interested in getting on the drum when they got out.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, yes. And so I got the number from the bro and got connected with another bro. His name is Wesley Roach, and was a very good friend of mine to this day. And people actually mistake us for each other. It's funny. I went to I went to powwow at the women's prison one time, and they were like, Roach. And I was like, no, that's my brother. I'm like, oh, okay. But anyway, yeah, so, and I met up with Roach, and he was working with Winona Stevens, who started Native American Reentry Services.
Okay.
He was working with her, creating the HEAL for Reentry drum. HEAL is an acronym for Helping Enrich Aboriginal Lives.
Oh my goodness, I never knew what it stood
Yeah.
for. Thank you.
Yeah. And it was our reentry drum, right? So anybody coming home that wanted to come and sit on it could do that.
Wow.
Because in prison, we get together about once or twice a week to do that, to drum. So it's kind of keeping with a little bit of the same schedule, because when you get out, you don't have that same structure.
Right.
You have to plan everything for yourself, and
Yeah.
a lot of times it can be very overwhelming. So having some similar things like that kind of helps ease that transition.
Oh, that's a very good point.
Yeah, and so it was good to be able to sit with other people that had just recently came home as well, and talking to them, see how things were going with them. Because it's one thing, to talk with your family, and they just don't get it.
Of course
They
not.
just don't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, I love them, they love me, but there's just some things that we can't talk about, or
Right.
it doesn't do a whole lot good to talk about. So it's good to have people that you can talk to some things about, right? And so I started getting together with them, going to drum practice, and then after about a month, I was going back into the prison that I was released from
Wow.
with the drum for their powwow, for their annual powwow.
That's wonderful.
It was amazing. So I got to see some people. They were very happy to know that they were not forgotten about. Because many
Absolutely.
times, and it's many times people will go, yeah, I'll write you, what I'm saying, I'll keep in touch and this and that. And like, these are people that you spent years with, what I'm saying? Ate with, showered with, everything, what I'm saying?
Right.
And then not to hear from them, you're like, man, but we understand life happens. There's a lot going on out in the real world. And so, there's a lot of understanding with that. But when people actually remember and they follow through, it's like, man,
Yeah.
thank you. So it was good to be able to go in. And these powwows, man, they are what everybody looks forward to all year long.
All year long.
All year. And they're not just looking forward to it, they are prepping for it. All year long, people are doing beadwork, making gifts, working on their regalia, doing paintings, doing cedar boxes as giveaways.
Leather work.
Yes.
I mean, it's just amazing
It is.
to see the generosity of those that are in, and their thankfulness for those of us that go in, for our presence, our prayers, being there for ceremony. And I think that it also brings them some validation too of just the beauty of their work, and people saying, oh my gosh, your beadwork is beautiful, the painting that you gifted me. And I think it also creates maybe just a few moments each week, and it depends so much on the systems of how much you're even allowed time to work on these things.
Yes.
And then supplies, that they get this time to have a little bit of creative normalcy in their lives. And it's my biased opinion that prisons would do better if they would offer more of that sort of time, because it brings healing.
Yes, it does. It does. Volunteer work, like, as you mentioned, their generosity, absolutely. Like, I could not overstate how generous these brothers are. When you think about it, some people are only making $55 a month, right?
Yes.
But they're turning out medallion pieces that have got like maybe 20, 30 hours into it, right? And they're just giving them away.
Yeah.
Just giving them away. Just glad to have their family and people show up.
And I think too, it's important for people to realize that those medallions, if we were at a Native art show, you know, a gathering, which we all go to the tables, you know. My husband really just is afraid when I travel because I buy something each trip and then I come home and say, it's pasta month. So he knows. But you know, a medallion can sell for $500, $1,000. And so that is a gift from the spirit and the heart. But also, a brother could send that outside with a visitor and earn money for it.
Yep.
And instead, that gift is just so meaningful.
It is. It is. The stuff that I've been gifted over the powwows, like it's still hanging up in the wall in my room.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of it is it's just amazing work. It
Yeah.
really is. It really is.
Now, so you had met Winona.
Yep.
And then how did you end up going to work for the Native American Reentry Services then?
Well, I had met Winona the first time I got out, and she was starting her Medicine Will 12-step group, and she asked me if I wanted to join, and this was the first time I got out of prison, and I was like, I told her that I couldn't. I wanted to, but I couldn't because DOC had me going to all these different classes. I just had all these extra requirements to do, and then to do that on top of it, just wasn't. I didn't have the time for it.
Right.
And so years went by, and then I ended up back at Cedar Creek, and Winona stopped. She was at Cedar Creek doing some type of presentation. So I let her know when I was getting out. She said, all right, touch base with me. So I did. I touched base with her, and that's how I got back to the drum. And then after that, so I stayed on the drum, and I was going to school at Pierce College, working on my AA. I had just finished up my AA at Pierce College, and I was getting ready to transfer to UW Tacoma. And I was talking to Winona, and she was like, you know, we're looking for a program manager for the Iron House Medicine program. And I was like, really? She said, yeah, we need somebody, I'm looking for somebody that can manage the Native American Religious Contract through DOC.
Wow.
And I was like, is that like, you know, being able to go back into the prisons and run sweats, do sweats and drumming and stuff? She's like, yes, that's what it is. And I was like, cool, where do I apply? And she told me where to apply, so I filled out the application, I filled out the application, turned in my resume, and had an interview, and got the job probably about a couple weeks later.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I was ecstatic. And you know what was really I'll never forget though, it's the only time that my criminal history has ever been a value. Or like my, you know what I'm saying, my life experience
Your
has been
lived
a value.
experience, yeah.
And I was taken back by, you know, the perspective that she's looking at things and what she really wanted to do. And you know, because I've always been interested in, you know, helping people, and helping the people. And I was like, well, you know, this might be right for me. But now I'm looking back now, I'm like, no, that was the creator's plan all along. It was just, you know what I'm saying? And so since then, when things are happening, I don't fight them. I I roll with them because I know it's creator's plan, and you know he's not going to let us fail.
I have to say, it's remarkable that you were able to do that, because here in Oregon, we've had a huge problem of getting volunteers in. And if they have served time, if they're a felon, whatever, they expect them to wait for years. And so it's really difficult. And, you know, we've tried to explain that people like you coming in, along with elders, other medicine people, this is what our people need. And that your lived experience is something that, well, I can tell your story, it's not as powerful. And your affinity, because you've been there, is so much more powerful for the brothers and the sisters. And so, every conversation creates more work, Leandru, let me tell you that. So now I'm like, who can I rope into it? Changing the law, because part of the work I do is also systematic, frustratingly slow and all of that. But we need people like you coming in. And also, I think showing people that, yes, this new life can happen. And it's not all new, as you said, because creators gifted you these things. It just took you a little while on the journey to get to where Creator wants you to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's just, being hard-headed as a kid. It's like, no, I'm going to do things my way. And they don't always work out to the best.
No,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
When you look at the program of HEAL, of the reentry program, what about it really helps people to overcome their incarceration, the reasons for it? What is really key to the programs?
Bottom line, connections.
Okay.
Connections. And that's really it, is connections, so that people aren't alone. You know what I'm saying? And giving them some, and I hate using the term, giving them some tools to use, right? But really, it's a little bit, it's really just going back to our basics, right? Back to how we used to handle things and do things in the past.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about Medicine Wheel 12-step, is because it does offer some suggestions, right? But really, it encourages your tribal traditions, your culture. And so, like, my people use a lot of corn pollen and cedar to smudge with, right? And but up here, there's a lot of cedar and sage. We don't really burn a whole lot of sage, but yeah. So it allows people to really get involved and bring their culture out, right?
Definitely.
And like in my case, and I think that's what contributed to a lot of my criminal activity and drug use, was that I was lost. I didn't have those connections that I had. Like, I grew up on a reservation.
Right.
But I took everything for granted. That I can always learn my language. I can always, you know what I'm saying, like driving places with my aunts and uncles and stuff, and they tell stories about the rocks. And because everywhere you go on the reservation, there's a story about a rock.
Of course
right?
there is.
So, but it's stuff like that I really took for granted. And when I got involved with the program, it brought me back to that. I was like, man, no, I remember this from a kid, and doing, you know what I'm saying, doing this, and really slowing things down, and just really taking them one day at a time, right? Because it kind of helps you set up your day. In the morning time, I get up, I do my thing, but before I really start my day, before I get anything going, I try to get my prayer in.
Me too.
I don't do it every day, but at some point during the day, I'll get it done, right?
Yes.
And so I honestly believe it's those connections and people getting reconnected to their culture, or even just learning about it for the first time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've been to some conferences, and like I was out, where was they at? I think I was at the Cache Creek one. Is a Healing Together conference with NAFA,
Oh, yes.
and Native Dads Network,
Right.
Mike Duncan, and one of the bros down there, he was like, he was Native, but he had been adopted out when he was younger with a non-Native family. But he's like, man, I've only been to a powwow one other time in my life. He's like, when I hear that drum, he's like, it settles me down, and it just, and I'm like, because it's in your blood.
Yep.
It's in
And
your
you
DNA.
feel that heartbeat of our nation, our people, that drum.
Yes.
No matter where you hear it.
Yeah, it's amazing how that can speak to somebody's spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just building on one thing that you shared too, which I really appreciate, is that it's not always the tools that people need, because we can get those lots of different places, but it's about seeing and recognizing, moving forward, what Creator's already given you. And so these programs that help connect to culture, to community, to spirituality, I've seen so many people that have really at the beginning of our time together had very low self-esteem. By the time we're done working and being together, they have said things like, Creator gifted me with song. And so when I get out, you know, I will never leave it again. Or maybe they'd never been told anything positive about themselves in their life.
Or being Native.
Yeah. And then they find out that, you know, they're a storyteller, or so many people thankfully go on to, you know, want to work in social services in some way with our people, especially with youth, drug addiction, things like that. And they see that they had those gifts. It was just they needed to come to Creator and to community to reclaim their culture. And as you shared, sometimes claim it in the first time, because not every Native American gets to grow up with their culture, with their family. And so I just so appreciate all that you do. It's just an honor to spend some time with you. And I know, because you know how it goes, we will be seeing each other again soon doing the work.
I am looking forward to it. But let me just say this as well too. You know, in addition to the connections, right? It's looking at the root cause of the problem.
Yes.
Because, you know, substance use, that's not the problem. That's a symptom.
Exactly.
You know, and so we really try to look at the root problem, and you know what it usually comes back to? Intergenerational trauma.
Yes.
And so dealing with that
Yep.
is a huge thing, because it's something that we just don't really talk about in Native communities.
No, and we need to deal with what has happened, you know, the way that, you know, our families and our ancestors suffered, and then we need to be thinking about, are we carrying that on in our own families through addiction or abuse, or not being there for your children, or whatever it is. And I think that's something that in the generations that I work with that are quite a bit younger than I am, I really see them. And even in the time we spent together yesterday, a sister was talking about, she does this for the children.
Yes, yes.
And so I think we need to come outside of ourselves a little bit sometimes and say, wait, I'm having a huge effect on this next generation and the one after and the one after. And so am I walking in a good way?
Yeah, because if we're really about the next 7 generations, what are we doing to help the next 7 generations?
Exactly.
You know, and because we're such a small community. We're such a
really
small
are.
community. And, you know, and once just kind of off topic, but like once I found out that, you know, all of us that are still here are like the last 1% that we're not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that says a lot.
A lot of responsibility to us, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, brother.
Absolutely.
Just love you so much, and I'll hold you up in prayer every day.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely.
It was a wonderful time.
Thank you.
I had a great time. Thank you.
Thank you.